Hi there, and welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast. This is Stuart Fensterheim, the Couples Expert. I have had many guests on my show, and Jim Thomas is probably right now the one guest that I've had more times than anyone. Now, you might be asking why. Jim is such an engaging guest and has such a wealth of knowledge. Jim is an internationally known speaker, trainer, EFT guru, as I would call him, and he is such an incredibly warm, welcoming guy that whenever he would like to get on the podcast or I need something, I always know that I can reach out to Jim and he will come through. Today's no exception. Jim and I are going to be having a conversation about sexuality, infidelity, having a really close relationship, and how to really have a sexual, incredibly exciting relationship with a long-term partner. Jim and I have known each other a few years now, and whenever we get going, the conversation for sure will be genuine. It's going to be something that you don't want to miss. It's also probably going to be something that you don't want your children to be listening to, because Jim and I tend to really get very authentic and talking about sex as it needs to be in very specific terms and helping all of you really understand that having a good sex life is about having an emotional connection. And when you have that emotional connection, sex is never more exciting. Monogamy is as thrilling as any other relationship that you might want to have, and that when the two of you really understand what you need to feel excited, turned on, and feel like you and your partner are in this world together, both having your back, and there's nobody better than Jim to bring us to that conclusion. So Jim, welcome to the podcast again. And thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's interesting. The two of us have been going back and forth on topics. And one of the things that I'm seeing, and I'm sure you are too, in your office, because I'm seeing a lot of it now, a little bit more of an increase of talk about sexuality and how to really join sex and intimacy with infidelity issues, but more importantly, how to really have an exciting sexual relationship. And you and I both being, I guess we would be considered the Middle Ages or something like that. I'm not quite sure.
Middle Ages plus. How about?
Yeah, I like
We're
that.
On the tail end of middle age. How's that?
My wife and I were talking about this. The best thing about being 62 is there's still places I get senior rates now. So at 55, there are places that you get the senior rates. So
that's right. Well, I'm 58, and I think I would call myself, I am clinging to middle age.
Oh, okay.
Right. For as long as I can until that glorious acceptance of the passage of time allows me to say, I am now a senior.
Right. And maybe one of the things we can talk about today is really about sexuality through the ages. Because I remember in graduate school, one of the courses we had to take was on sexuality. Mm-hmm. And they showed a video, and every single person in the video was up and beyond 60s.
Right.
And having sex. That was part of what they were. And it was so fascinating. The people in the audience, and these were all people training to be counselors now, were appalled about seeing the elderly having sex.
Oh.
And it really is an interesting concept and I think today it's
a sort of ageism bias.
Yeah, so it crosses all genders and all classes and all professions, I think.
When you first said across the ages, there was two meanings, right? Because there's across the ages like across the centuries.
Right.
And I think that's one aspect of this. It's as if, particularly, probably coming out of the Victorian age, which was really the first sexual revolution in America, the flappers, girls, and the roaring 20s and stuff, there was an increased awareness and an acceptance of that. Oh, wow, people are sexual. The big sexual revolution of the 60s. And we have this phenomenon now, I think, where every generation feels like they discover sex. Right?
The newest. We have it. Answer.
We have the news.
We have the answer.
And we brought our, there was a sort of free love, enjoy sex for sex sake in the 60s. And some people see the millennials as being very into like open relationships and things like this, or, oh my gosh, we have 50 shades of gray, black, mauve, and purple. There's this thing called BDSM. And I think it's important to remind ourselves that people have been sexual since the beginning of time. People were having oral sex in the Middle Ages. Women have been having orgasms for a long time. What has changed and is really exciting is more awareness, more information is available to people. Even if you live in a subculture that maybe is shaming of your sexuality, you can go online now in private and learn and educate yourself. I think what's also exciting is the general move to more what sociologists call egalitarian relationships. Let's say, particularly in heterosexual relationships, for example, that men and women really striving to be more equal. This plays out in very good ways in the bedroom, in our sexual relationship, where people can explore with each other. So there's sex through the ages, the reminder that our grandparents and great-grandparents were sexual. They were maybe more private about it. There were songs, say in the 50s, where the adults all knew what was happening under the honey tree or what yum yum was.
Right.
And the 10-year-olds didn't, and that was okay with everyone. And then, now it's often more overtly talked about. And then the way you brought it up, sex through the ages, that yes, many couples in their 60s, 70s, well into their 80s.
And the impact of culture is interesting because I recall the I Love Lucy show. And one of the things that I remember an interview with Lucille Ball, and they were talking about that when they were filming that, the fact that they were, number one, in the same bed, and that part of what they had to do is keep one foot on the floor.
That's right.
To make it okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
All in the Family, the very first episode, the core joke and introduce these people was that Archie and Edith go off to church, and Archie gets upset and they come home early. And as they come through the house and they yell for their daughter and Meathead, they come running down the stairs disheveled, and it's apparent that they were trying to grab a quickie.
Right.
And Norman Lear had to fight with the censors who said, you can't do that. We can't make it clear that they were having sex. And he basically just ignored them. And, and so this is 71, I believe.
Right.
That's not that long ago, that we were trying to pretend that people weren't sexual. And I think that's part of the liberation that couples can celebrate and know that sexual intimacy, sexual play is something normal and healthy and good for them and to be enjoyed. I think the other thing that can happen, there's a little shadow to it, which is a sort of pressure. Whatever's in the media, here a really clear one, men that watch pornography get distorted ideas about what sex should be, or
what's normal.
Right. And young men thinking that, you walk into a house and a woman is going to want to have sex with you. And some of these things that need to be talked about. But overall, I think it's a super positive development. I mean, I just think, again, across the ages, Dr. Ruth showing up on TV in the 80s and this old lady, this older woman talking about penises and vaginas and orgasms and really, really helping us all sort of come to this place. We in the United States have this sort of weird love-hate with sex. We are puritanical roots, and sex is to make babies, and mixed messages to women that are still out there that, to be both virginal and sexual at the same time. And
provocative. Can't forget that. They have to be provocative too.
Right, provocative. And then to be blamed for men who then objectify them. There are still all sorts of gender politics at play, and people can feel pressured. I saw a study saying the average couple has sex this many times, and we're 30% below that average. Uh-oh. So I hope today that we can talk about it in a way that moves.
I mean, not to sort of divert it all, but
yeah.
In the political field with this last election, whether you're a pro-Hillary or pro-Donald Trump or not, but I recall one of the big things that brought this to my mind in terms of what you're now addressing is how many conversations were there about what Donald was wearing? And how many conversations about the pantsuit that Hillary's wearing?
Every time Hillary.
I mean, that is like the most obvious example of that.
Yeah, or just ghost. It's still true at the checkout line at the grocery store or Costco or something. Pictures of women, and they're airbrushed and blemishes are taken out. And I remember an interview with Juliana Margulies, it's The Good Wife,
right.
A show that my wife and I binged watched. We'll confess, I have binge watched TV. That's the new addiction. I think she was 50 at the time, and they said, "You're looking awfully good in the show for being 50." And she said, "Hey, you need to know there's pounds of makeup on me to make me look younger." And that's really the one thing I don't like about the show.
Right.
Is it puts pressure. It's the appearance beauty machine is much more on women, I think, than men in general, though men too can. Just yesterday I had a couple where he got real about he's a shorter man, he's not very stocky, and how vulnerable that is, and that she has never said to him anything really positive about his body, and it's a very vulnerable place to go.
I think one of the more vulnerable times in my life growing up was this whole thing about the locker room as a boy. So you're sitting there and you see other guys' penises.
Right, yeah.
And what happens to your self-esteem if your penis size is not as big as some of the other guys? Right. And how do you then deal with those issues around your own sexuality?
And who do you talk to about that? Even today, with all the changes, how many teenage boys are going to go to someone and say, does it matter? Is mine smaller?
Right.
And maybe in sex ed class, the teacher says, well, often the difference between flaccid penises and erect penises, there's a great size sort of bringing them together, which is called an erection. Who talks to them about that, and who do they talk to? And then for women, I think body image, body shame. Does my partner, male or female, does my partner like, enjoy, and value me as me and the body that I have, not the body I'm supposed to have?
Right. And then we can even bring it further along and we start talking about sexual dysfunction, which gets into so many other things, such as I had a client a while back. The two of them were having sex, and I had an individual session because I always do that sort of in my assessments. And we began to talk about sexuality, and I learned that she had dryness, and every time they had sex, she was in excruciating, not just a little bit of pain.
It's painful.
This was excruciating pain, and her fear was, I can't tell my husband or he'll leave me.
Yeah, you'll leave me. You won't want me. I think if I did an informal, unscientific poll of female clients and women I've known that have shared this, that the average woman had sex about 2 years earlier than they were really wanting to, because of a sense that their partner wanted it and it was conditional, or it was a way to bring them closer or to feel affection, to feel loved, as opposed to if I wait a couple of years, my heart and my mind will catch up with my body, and this will be a more meaningful, pleasant experience. So yeah, vaginal dryness, pelvic pain, men who are worried, do I come too fast? Do I last too long? I call it the orgasm gap.
Right.
In surveys, you get different averages, but this is not an uncommon one. Say 78% or 80% of men in a recent study report that their partner had an orgasm in their most recent sexual encounter. So if we focus on heterosexual couples in this example, 62% of women report they had an orgasm. So you have the
just a little bit
when
of a
Harry met Sally,
yeah.
I'll have what she's having when she
Right.
fakes the orgasm
Right.
in the movie. That my apologies to millennials that haven't seen it or people who haven't seen the movie.
YouTube, millennials, go to YouTube. You'll
find it where she's telling
that
Harry,
scene will be all over the place.
Yeah, I faked my orgasm, and men faking orgasms, which is I'm not really enjoying this experience, but I don't want to hurt her feelings or I want to get it over with. That leads to the whole piece about trust. I look at sexuality more and more with couples and in my practice as this opportunity, also with peril and dangers, this opportunity to open up and have an emotional, physical, sexual honesty with each other that will spread into other areas of your relationship. And vice versa, if you have trust and openness and vulnerable conversations about other things in your life, your relationship, you can bring those into your sexual intimacy in ways that can really deepen connection. I'll give you one example is a fascinating British study around fantasy and role play, and showing that a vast majority of couples visit role play fantasy type stuff. Common ones are things like pretending we're meeting at a bar, or I'm not talking about the BDSM role playing of we're
picking someone up, like a couple predetermines that we're going to meet at the bar, and one of them's going to try to pick the other up. Those types of things.
Let's pretend that we're in an experience that you had when you were not with me, or we're just different ways. I'll be the cheerleader, you be the captain of the team, or whatever.
Right.
And what they found was the couples who do this in a collaborative way and equal, where it's not being forced by one partner in a coercive way or a manipulative way, like you will, go through this fantasy with me whether you like it or not. These couples also report a deeper emotional intimacy that generalizes to their whole relationship. And the beauty of that is it sparks, erotic novelty. But my belief as an emotionally focused therapist like you that believes in their emotional bond is the most important foundation in the relationship is, I think what's happening is they take the risk of sharing different ideas that they have in their fantasy life. Over time, it's like, well, I'm going to take a little risk here. I'm a little nervous to tell you, but I've always wondered what it'd be like if we pretended I'm the handyman and I've come over to work on the house and you seduce me. Oh, wow. Okay, you accepted that. And then you tell me some fantasy and I accept it. And we are learning to open up to each other in a way that also ends up being, playful and erotically charged. But perhaps the real benefit of it is we're getting to know each other at a deeper level.
Right. One of the things that I tell couples, what I think where people lose out on their intimate life is not defining it as just one more dimension of the playfulness that two people have in a marriage or in a relationship, that it's just playfulness with no limits.
Or the limits come...
Well, you two define the limits.
Exactly. They come from you, from your partner, and from shared limits. And so just so people know, some of the most common fantasies, to normalize it out there, that role players enjoy, and again, the majority of couples will engage in role playing and sharing fantasies, at least from time to time, are things like pretending to be a doctor or nurse, pretending to be a
teacher and student,
a hooker or stripper, being the secretary or the support person to somebody in a higher role in the hierarchy, slave or master, the maid or the butler, a captive prisoner, the repairman or repairwoman, the random stranger at the bar, etc. And
pool boy and the woman sitting at home and her husband's at work.
Yeah, and these sexual fantasies will differ. They often involve power differentials, some sort of breaking a rule of forbidden love. And people will wear costumes and have props and things at home.
Where it gets tricky, though, and I think we have to talk about this, and this is where the boundary issues are so critical, when people start talking about including others into the
and I think that's you would think from the media that the level of open marriage, swinging, and things has skyrocketed. It doesn't appear to have increased with any dramatic frequency. People that are very monogamous, I suggest to them, if you feel sort of naturally monogamous, I'm with my partner, I want to be with my partner, to not sit in judgment of people who are attracted to swinging or polyamory. Open marriage and swinging and polyamory are all describing different aspects where polyamorous couples are in emotional relationship with one or another person or another couple, or versus open marriage. It's okay if you sleep with someone. It's okay if I sleep with someone. And then swinging, which typically implies going and doing something together at like a club or a party where we're both going to a place, we're both going to be with another partner. Now, what's really interesting, Stuart, is the number of people who will say, let's say 7 to 15% or somewhere in there, different surveys, that we have an open marriage. It's much higher than the people who actually act on it. So the people who act on it is much lower. And it may be that for some people, just the idea that I could serve some function in the relationship. And,
it's something about being free to,
where I don't have to.
Right.
But I try in my work. I think it's important for us therapists, in particular, to be sex positive and be relational orientation positive. And so if the sexual behavior is not causing harm to someone, a child, or I think that's a choice for people to make themselves. What I would say, when we come back to trust, is that if you're going to have an open marriage, you're swinging things, to be smart, to have safe sex, to use condoms. If you have alcohol involved, then the odds of people using condoms plummet when they're intoxicated, and you need to be safe and honest with each other.
And with this openness of sexuality and people, the positives that we want to sort of promote here is through the ages, through the years, we've gotten more and more where we're able to talk about sex in such a different, in a much more specific way, and talking about the unspoken years ago. That also then leads to people sometimes feeling more dissatisfied sexually, maybe realistically, maybe not realistically. And then you have something like an infidelity. And I think we do need to address those things.
Yeah, I think one of the things you're talking about, that's part of the shadow, I think, that comes with this, is that as people talk more and it's in the media more and it's in movies and things, or, the guy watching porn and the couple are having intercourse for 40 minutes. And, what they don't show is when they cut that camera angle, they paused and brought more moisturizer out,
right.
Had, some water, and these types of things can lead to unrealistic expectations. I think for me, what's so important is the affectional side, the affectional aspect of our sex life. It correlates with research that indicates that couples that have a more secure emotional bond can be emotionally vulnerable with each other, have a deep sense that my partner's there for me and values me, accepts me, and I belong, tend to also have more satisfying sex lives. And also correlated with that secure emotional bond is couples are more affectionate. They hold hands more. My wife and I were in Hawaii back in 2013 in Kona after doing some workshops, and we were walking up and down the street a couple days in a row. It's not a big area, the village there. And we hold hands, and this car full of 18, 19-year-olds, convertible, red, nice convertible, would drive by, and they were loud, and they'd be hooping and yelling and stuff. And then the second day, they must have passed us for the second time that day. They passed us a couple of times the day before as we were walking around. We're holding hands, and they yell. This young man yells out. They slow the car down a little bit, and he goes, "Hey, you, romantic couple holding hands. Keep up the good work. You're an inspiration. And they drove off, and I thought, wow, and I looked at my wife, who had said that morning, it's stunning to me. Here we are in this romantic place, how few couples hold hands.
Right.
So
And
affection.
just how, and that goes right to, Sue Johnson's work and the whole soothing the threatened brain and how just touch, and that's really what you're talking about.
Well, I'm talking about secure, safe, bonded sex is the way into the eroticism. That often what's happening is one of the partners says, well, we're not close enough, we don't have enough sex, and they try to force that through some sort of new erotic thing that their partner doesn't feel safe about. And sometimes because of values, or I don't want to have anal sex and you do. There's things like that, but it's more often what I experience in the therapy room is I don't feel safe with you in general. Why would I want to try a role play with you? Or why would I want to fantasize about other people? Or why would I want...
Why would I want to be physically and emotionally vulnerable with you?
Right. And so affection, or look at kissing and couples who kiss. I often ask my couples in first or second sessions, and I recommend this to couples therapists, how often do you kiss affectionately, kiss more than a peck, kiss outside of, a lead up to intercourse? I was asking this last fall, and this woman started to tear up in the first session, and he says, what's going on? She goes, remember stair kissing? He goes, oh yeah. And she looks at me and said, the first couple of years we were together, we did stair kissing because I'm shorter. I would stand on the first step and we would kiss and sort of neck and look at each other and talk about nothing for a couple minutes whenever we rejoined at the end of the day. And we got into that big fight about his parents. And I think that was the last time we stair kissed. And what it is, that kissing for affection, not leading up to sex.
There's a different quality in it.
Yeah.
Your wife is like one of the most exciting moments and emotionally close moments that happens for my wife and I at times is one of us is doing a task, like my wife is cooking dinner, and I come up next to her, give her a peck on her neck, turn her face toward me and say, you're just amazing, and give her a nice kiss and say, I'm so thrilled that you're in my life, and walk away.
Yeah, it's just...
Talk about love language. Right. That's love language. Right. Touch, emotion, vulnerability, and having your words mean something.
So that's a beautiful example. You turned it into what I call like a spontaneous ritual, right? That you do it in a ritual fashion, like it happens a lot. And it sounds like it's prompted by a sense you get, a feeling you get, the warm fuzzies or something about, oh, look at my amazing partner over there. And she is dicing up that onion and making it. And it's, whoa, she's amazing on so many levels. And I want to go tell her. And so affection and sharing with each other what we mean to each other and how important we are to each other, our emotional need for each other, when we express that sexually, is so powerful. And couples, I encourage you, like, are you looking in your partner's eyes? Do you tell them when you're being sexual, I need you?
Right. The turning of my wife's head is very important to me.
That's right.
Because I want that to be something that doesn't just get lost.
That's right. The gaze.
In the nuances.
You're making eye contact, which is another affectionate thing that drops often in marriage, or people just have never experienced to really gaze in each other's eyes. So to gaze at each other, to be affectionate with each other and emotionally intimate with each other is foreplay and can go on for days. It's romantic. It's saying you matter to me. And it builds up a very natural, lovely desire and tension for, I would like to consummate for this emotional closeness and my need for you physically with you. And then you can, when you feel secure, what I say to couples, when you feel more secure, the playful, the erotic, the let's do something different will feel safer.
And it usually comes naturally, and doesn't have to be forced. It's just part of the whole picture that happens.
It still has a nice edge to it. It's still edgy to share something new and to talk about something new and to try something new, but it's coming out of a emotional, affectionate bond.
You know who David Schnarch is, right, Jim?
Yeah.
I saw him years and years and years ago, before I was even knew anything about EFT. I went to a workshop, and he described the sexual relationship that we're all looking for, and he used a term that I think is really cute: electric socket sex.
Yeah.
It's like you put your finger in an electric socket and your hair's raised, you know? That's what we all want, and that's really what the emotional and physical relationship coming together will bring you.
Having seen him present and having read Passionate Marriage, and I humbly disagree with most or a lot of how he coaches people to get there.
Right. Well, yeah, I'm not talking about that piece.
And he talks about making eye contact with each other during sex, I believe. I've heard him talk about that.
I think this brings up something for me, though, in terms of trust violations. And I think we want to talk a little bit about that.
Yes.
It's like betrayals, because I think most people listening to this podcast would agree with most of what we've been saying. The hard part, though, is how do you bring that back?
I would guess that there are a number of you listening right now. And then when we talk about sort of kissing affectionately, really, we talk about being more open, making eye contact during sex, letting your partner know. And when I say sex, I mean, surveys indicate there's, on average, like 40 couples there's so many different ways to be sexual with each other. They're not just talking about intercourse.
Right.
But the idea of like saying, I need you, I love you, and a lot of these things are making listeners nervous because they maybe had that early on or they never had that.
Right.
That sex became either, like for the woman that you talked about with the dryness, it's something I'm enduring because I don't want to lose my partner, or the partner who's faking the orgasm because they don't want to hurt their partner's feeling, or the person who feels very constrained by, we do, say, missionary position every time, or you never lick me, you used to lick me, or that these are edgy things for folks. Right. And I'm segueing into your trust question and about affairs and things, because I think one of the things that primes affairs, both emotionally or sexually, is if we don't go here with our partner into a sexual intimacy that either brings us towards emotional intimacy, as when I was talking about like role plays and sharing those, or is born out of emotional intimacy, so that our sexual intimacy and our emotional intimacy are part of the same sort of soup that we live in, that we make ourselves more susceptible in the marriage to affairs. I love the first chapter of Don't Sweat the Small Stuff for Men, Carlson's book, is Have an Affair. And what he talks about is have an affair with your partner.
Right.
Okay,
I knew that was coming.
Straight. Yeah, have an affair with your partner. And what is an affair? What is the rush? There are two big rushes we see from affairs. One is people actually get a rush out of the secrets themselves. You find out people like the sex wasn't that great. It was the keeping it a secret, the secondary of like
the sneaky part of it.
The sneaky part of it. The other is often what people will report is either I felt more affection, like on the emotional affair side of things, or people having these sort of not very emotionally intimate sexual affairs. I was accepted. I was just liked. And what I say to couples, if you want to affair-proof your marriage, bring affection, acceptance, and exploration and discovery into the marriage itself, into your bond, gay, straight, lesbian, bisexual, but in this, whatever you identify as your primary emotional bond, even a swingers, bring that into this relationship. And affairs are often, unfortunately, happening because people have put a brake on getting to know each other more.
And when you have that, that's where the loneliness and emptiness comes in, because we know people don't have affairs strictly about sex. It's about the loneliness.
Yeah, pain, avoiding pain.
And sex being that part, that cement that sometimes will bring people together.
And then when that's happened, how do you rebuild trust? Because it's such a painful thing to find out that your partner gave their heart or their body or, both. They shared things with another person. They did things with another person. They texted, "I love you." They haven't told you they love you in 3 years. These things are so painful. And maybe they reflect the vulnerability inherent in having a sexual relationship with a partner over time, that you're so important to me. And if we are a couple that's seeking to be, monogamous with each other, and that's a value we have, then I want to know that you won't go outside our marriage. And I see a number of couples in the last few years that were swinging, but they had an agreement of like, you won't fall in love with somebody else. You're just going to fuck. Mm-hmm. Excuse my French. And then one of the partners fell in love with someone and they just didn't know what to do with that. It hurts.
And then allowing yourself to have the conversation that I think what you're really saying here, you have to have the conversation, which is about why were you interested?
First and foremost, have the conversation now. Wherever you find yourself pulling back and hiding vulnerability, like you're longing for your partner, you're longing for more acceptance or more affection or a more solid sense of belonging, or a sense that you're with me and you have my back and I have yours, however you experience that. And in the bedroom too, the sense of that closeness is lacking. 40% of men in a recent study, 28% of women were very disappointed in the lack of romance from their partner. And time again, it's men will find wanting more romance, but they don't know how to say it.
Yes.
It makes them feel wookie. It makes them feel, weak in the knees.
I think the value of folks like you and I, Jim, who are male gender therapists, really allow men to begin to share those pieces in the office with us because we begin to talk about it, which gives them permission.
I remember when my wife and I were first together, and then we were becoming exclusive, then we're committed to each other. And early on, we would often, as younger people do, we would drink and then have sex, and maybe just a glass or two of wine or maybe a little more, and then we were feeling safer with each other, and we started having sex without drinking. And I was like, holy moly, this is way better. All your faculties. Which then changed my whole experience of sex and sexuality. It was the first time when I was with her and we're making love, and I realized, oh my gosh, I literally had this like part of me that said, you're making love now. And then I said it to her. I said something, and I won't, the specifics are private, but basically communicated in that moment, I so love being with you. And this is just one of the ways that I love being with you. And then her sharing with me later, oh God, that was just such an incredible turn on for her. I didn't ask her permission to share that story. I hope I don't get in trouble. I should have trouble with being married to an extroverted, gregarious trainer therapist, as I sometimes, but I think she'll be okay with it.
I hope so. I think she will too. But we only have about 5 more minutes. And one of the things I want you to...
Let's talk about repairing trust then.
Yeah, that. And also I want you to elaborate before we're done to help couples, because I think one of the things that I really get asked a lot has to do with, give me some specific things I can do now to help, number one, have that conversation that before something happens, and the other as well.
Let me share a couple of those. So one is show interest in your partner. Best of all, show genuine, sincere interest in your partner. And how is your partner different now than the day you met them? how are they different now than they were before you met them, at some age, at 15 or 20 or as a kid? And how are they the same? Show interest in what's consistent in your partner's person and show interest in how they're evolving. And if you're in a really tough place, you may have to fake it till you make it. Just practice showing interest until something gets sparked, because a lack of genuine interest in who your partner is will impact you in the bedroom. In the bedroom and sexually, show interest in your partner. What is this experience really like for them? When you touch them there, or you kiss them, or you lick some part of them, or you're inside, or they're inside of you, or you're inside of each other, whatever's happening, show genuine interest in what's happening to them. Sexually, there is the great liberation in showing and being very interested in your partner's experience and pleasure, and then reciprocate that. Both partners to be interested in your partner's pleasure, take some pressure off of, not in a way of performance, but what's really happening for you right now. What do you like about this? What's bringing you closer to me? When's the last time you sort of made out? It's like teenagers on the couch, because you don't want to go any farther in case the dad comes barreling in or something. And so you're doing everything but holding hands, gazing, truly listening to each other. And then the most important things to try to create times where you're sharing an experience and you're talking about it. As simple as you're watching a sunset together. You're taking a walk and you're walking together. You're just trying to share experiences with each other. If your sex life is very strained or feels empty or distant, then start by trying to create mutual experiences outside of the pressure or the fear or the trauma. If you're a trauma survivor, this is really hard. If you've had a bad sexual experience in the relationship or before the relationship, sometimes we have to start outside of the bedroom. Trust.
The holding hands that we talked about earlier, that's one of the easiest ones.
The nuzzling, getting your partner's eye contact, nuzzling. And all of these things work, heterosexual and gay, lesbian relationships. The affectional bond is the same. How it gets expressed sexually changes. Another is try to identify, do I tend to be more reactive sexually or responsive? What that means is, am I a person who I see my partner, it doesn't take much, I'm getting sexually aroused, or I'm more responsive to my partner's affection and attention. I'm a person who needs to be warmed up. I need seduced, or I need foreplay. I need time together. And learn that about each other as sort of a language of sexuality. And sometimes it goes back and forth. You may go through a period of time where you feel more reactive. You're a woman in your early 30s and, your hormones are changing, and you suddenly telling your husband, I don't know, it's kind of weird, but lately I see you outside doing yard work and I just want to jump your bones. And, but to be communicating with each other about that, because a lot of what tension that occurs in sexual relationships is the more person with reactive sexuality is, let's do it. I'm ready. Come on. I want to have this experience with you. And the more responsive person saying, hey, I'm feeling objectified. So how do you meld those two together? And rebuilding trust after an affair, a sexual affair, is tough. One of the things I recommend is not rushing in and trying to find out every detail about whatever sex your partner had, because many of my clients will report to me later, I regret some of the images that I created as I forced a confession from my partner. Take your time on that. Just let yourself decide 3 months later whether you want to know every detail. Right. Some people will.
And the recording, which goes through the heart of everything we've talked about, it's really about how do you rebuild the emotional connection. And that's really about starting with, may I hold your hand?
Right. The same things that will help you rebuild emotional connection after an affair. Our sexuality before an affair, after an affair, though, there is this piece of your dignity as a listener. You and you alone can decide for yourself what your sexual range is and what you want to experience. And you have to be clear with your partner about that and hear what they say about that. And so if your partner has betrayed your trust, you have every right and your responsibility to yourself to let them know if it's, never again, this is what hurt. But often you may need the help of a good trained like EFT therapist. You can go to places like coloradoeft.com. If you're in Colorado, you can go to ICEPT. It's ICEEFT.com and find a therapist that's trained in a therapy that can help you recover. Or you can come see a knucklehead therapist like me, and we'll do maybe a 2-day intensive. Come fly to Denver and work with me, and we'll see if we can turn the corner and help you rebuild that trust.
Yeah, on my website, I have a bunch of resources also for folks.
Beautiful. Yeah, well, you're a great resource. These podcasts and, your website and your practice. And but that is just to let people know I do, if you're interested, do intensive. So if you want to come from outside of Colorado with one couple at a time, do 2-day intensives. And you can learn more about those at jimthomas.care.
I will have it on the show notes as well, Jim.
Oh, good. Great. Well, Stuart, it's been a pleasure talking
Jim,
with
thank you very much.
Yeah.
I love when we get together every now and then to do these podcasts because there's always something I pick up.
Yeah, I learned too.
And I know our conversations help those listening. And I wish all of you a wonderful, wonderful week, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.